The day my daughter went into surgery, the sky was so blue it felt offensive. Too clean. Too bright. Like the world didn't understand what was about to happen. Emily was 32. Too young to have a tumor the size of a clenched fist pressing against her spine. Too young to sign consent forms that listed paralysis and death as potential outcomes. She tried to smile for me that morning in the hospital room, pale under fluorescent lights, her hair pulled back because she said she didn't want it getting in the surgeon's way. She was always thoughtful like that. "Dad," she whispered, squeezing my hand, "it's routine. Dr. Patel said they do this all the time." Routine. There's no such thing as routine when it's your child under anesthesia. The hallway outside the operating room smelled like bleach and warm plastic. Nurses moved quickly, efficient, detached. I kissed her forehead before they rolled her through the double doors. Her hand slipped from mine, and that was the last time she looked at me awake. I stood there staring at those doors long after they closed. And then my phone buzzed. I wish I'd never looked at it. It was a message from a man named Connor, an old friend of mine from the marina downtown. I'd known him since before Emily was born. Retired electrician, fished every weekend. His text was short. "Joe, you know where Ryan is today?" Ryan, my son-in-law. I typed back that he was at the hospital, that his wife was in surgery. Connor responded with a picture. It loaded slowly, sunlight reflecting off open water, champagne flutes, a white yacht docked just off Lake Travis, a banner strung along the rail. Freedom Weekend. And there he was, Ryan, sunglasses on, shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, arm around a blonde woman who was definitely not my daughter, laughing, head thrown back like he didn't have a care left in the world, time-stamped 23 minutes earlier. I remember feeling very calm, too calm. Like something inside me had quietly snapped in half. I stared at that picture for a long time, long enough that the edges of my vision started to blur. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't change. I just understood something. He wasn't coming. Not to the hospital. Not to sit beside her bed. Not to hold her hand when she woke up confused and in pain. He had chosen his Freedom Weekend, while my daughter was being cut open. I met Ryan 10 years earlier when Emily brought him to Sunday dinner. He had a firm handshake, too firm, the kind of man who measures dominance in grip strength. He worked in investment consulting, drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford without her salary. Emily was the one with the stable job, pediatric nurse, steady income, health insurance. I noticed small things early on, how he corrected her in conversation, how he interrupted, how he'd laugh at her stories and then subtly rewrite them to center himself. I didn't like him, but Emily loved him. And when you're a father, sometimes you convince yourself you're just being protective, that you don't understand modern marriages, that love looks different now. They married fast, too fast, and slowly, over the years, she got quieter. Ryan, though, he got louder. Bigger business ventures, flashier friends, more weekends networking, more photos online of parties and boats and hotel rooftops. Emily stopped posting much at all. I asked her once, 3 years ago, if she was happy. She smiled in that tired way and said, "It's complicated, Dad." I should have pushed harder, but fathers don't always know when to push. Back in that hospital hallway, I stepped outside into the parking lot. The sun hit my face, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of something dark. I called him. It rang 4 times. He picked up on the 5th. Music blasted in the background. Laughter. Wind. "Hey, Joe," he shouted, overly cheerful. "Everything good?" "Everything good." I looked back at the hospital building behind me. "She's in surgery," I said quietly. There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough. "Yeah, man, I know. She said it'd take a few hours. I didn't want to just sit around, you know? Doctor said it's routine." "Routine?" I swallowed. "You're on a boat." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Connor sent you that, didn't he? Relax, Joe. It's just a quick weekend thing. I'll swing by later tonight." Later tonight? If she survived. I could hear a woman's voice in the background asking him to come back for a toast. He covered the phone and said something I couldn't quite hear, but I caught the end of it. Just her dad. Just her dad. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "If anything happens to her—" "Nothing's going to happen," he cut in. "You worry too much." Then he hung up. Didn't even say goodbye. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 long, hollow hours. I sat in that waiting room with a paper cup of stale coffee going cold in my hands. I watched families come and go, some crying, some relieved. Every time those doors opened, my heart kicked against my ribs. At hour 5, a nurse finally called my name. Her face told me everything before her mouth did. "There were complications," she said gently. "Internal bleeding. They got it under control. But Emily lost a lot of blood. She was alive, barely. She'd need monitoring in ICU." I nodded. I thanked her. I walked into that cold, humming room full of machines. My daughter lay there, pale as the sheets, tubes in her arms, a ventilator breathing for her. And her husband was drinking champagne on a yacht. I stood beside her bed and took her hand. It was warm, weak, but warm. "I'm here, baby," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I made a decision. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and permanent. Ryan thought this was Freedom Weekend. He had no idea what freedom was about to cost him. "You know something, kid? Betrayal doesn't always arrive shouting. Sometimes it shows up wearing sunglasses on a boat, and sometimes the man who looks calm is the one already planning the storm. We'll stop here for tonight, because revenge, the kind that lasts, doesn't start with shouting. It starts with understanding exactly who you're dealing with. And I understood him very clearly that day. Hospitals at night are different creatures. During the day, they hum. Phones ringing, carts rolling, doctors speaking in quick, confident bursts. At night, they whisper. The ICU lights were dimmed when I sat beside Emily's bed. Machines blinked in soft greens and reds. The ventilator made a steady, mechanical sigh. In, out, like the building itself was breathing for her. I watched her chest rise, counted the seconds between beeps. Ryan didn't show. Not that night. Not the next morning either. Around 9 a.m., I stepped into the hallway to stretch my back. I hadn't slept. Didn't feel like I deserved to. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "Hey, rough night. Signal was bad. How's she doing?" Rough night. I stared at that message until the letters blurred. Signal was bad. Lake Travis has better signal than most of this town. I knew that because I used to take Emily fishing there when she was little, back when life was simple, back when scraped knees were the worst injury I ever had to worry about. I typed back one sentence. She almost died. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, wow, that's crazy. Keep me posted. That's crazy. I leaned against the hospital wall and closed my eyes. You ever feel anger so cold it doesn't even burn? That's what it was. Not fire. Ice. He arrived sometime around noon. Not running, not panicked. He walked into the ICU wearing sunglasses, indoors, and a crisp white polo shirt that still smelled faintly of cologne and lake water. He looked rested. I stood when I saw him. He gave me that same firm handshake from 10 years earlier. "Joe," he said softly, like we were at a funeral reception. "Man, this sucks. This sucks." I looked at him carefully. Really looked. There was a faint tan line where his sunglasses had been. His wrist had a new leather band bracelet I'd never seen before. Probably bought on the marina. "She's stable," I said. "Good. Good." He exhaled like someone who'd just avoided a parking ticket. He walked to her bedside and leaned over, kissing her forehead. "Hey, babe," he whispered like she might answer. She didn't move. He glanced at the monitors, uncomfortable. Hospitals aren't glamorous. They don't photograph well. After maybe 3 minutes, he turned to me. "Doctor said she'll be okay." "She almost bled out," I said evenly. He winced slightly like I'd used crude language at the dinner table. "Yeah, but she didn't." There it was, the shift. He wasn't relieved. He was inconvenienced. Over the next 2 days, I barely left her side. Ryan did. He had calls, meetings, investors flying in. He spent more time in the hospital lobby on his phone than in her room. I noticed something else, too. He kept asking about paperwork, insurance coverage, surgery costs, recovery timelines. Not once did he ask how scared she must have been. Not once did he sit longer than 15 minutes. The third night, around 2 a.m., Emily finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. I leaned forward instantly. Hey, baby, I'm here." She blinked slowly. The ventilator tube was gone by then, replaced with oxygen. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Dad?" "I'm here." Her eyes searched the room. Then she asked the question that cut straight through me. "Where's Ryan?" I hesitated, just for half a second. "He's around," I said. She nodded faintly. Even then, even hooked up to machines, she tried to protect him. That's who she was. Ryan showed up later that morning when visiting hours started. Emily was weak, but awake. When she saw him, she smiled. God, that smile. Soft, forgiving, loyal. He leaned down and kissed her like he'd just rushed through traffic to get there. "I was so worried," he said. I stood near the window and said nothing. Emily squeezed his hand. "You came back," she whispered. Back. That word sat heavy in the air. He laughed lightly. "Of course I did. Where else would I be?" "On a yacht, with another woman, celebrating Freedom Weekend." But I didn't say it. Not yet. Revenge isn't about explosion. It's about patience. That evening, while Ryan went downstairs to grab coffee, Emily drifted in and out of sleep. Her phone lay on the bedside table, buzzing occasionally. I wouldn't normally touch someone's phone, but I'm her father, and something inside me needed confirmation, just to be sure I wasn't imagining the rot. I picked it up. No password. She never hid anything. There were notifications from social media. Tagged photos. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened one. There it was again. The yacht. Clearer this time. Ryan in full view. Champagne raised high. Arm firmly around that same blonde woman. The caption read, "Nothing like a little freedom before settling back into reality." Posted 4 hours into Emily's surgery. My jaw tightened. Freedom before reality. I scrolled further. More pictures. Ryan at the helm, grinning. Ryan diving into the water. Ryan and the blonde woman clinking glasses alone at sunset. Time-stamped while my daughter was bleeding on an operating table. I set the phone down carefully, very carefully. And in that moment, my decision solidified. Not rage, not screaming, not confrontation. Something far more effective. I was going to let Ryan believe he'd gotten away with it. Let him keep thinking I was just her dad. Old, emotional, harmless. Men like him only guard themselves against equals. They never see fathers coming. When Emily was discharged a week later, she needed home care, physical therapy, medication management. Ryan complained quietly about how intense recovery was going to be, how it might delay some opportunities. I offered to stay with her. He didn't object. I moved into their guest room that night, and that's when I began paying attention. Really paying attention. The late-night texts he deleted, the way he stepped outside to take calls, the faint perfume that wasn't Emily's, the expensive watch he suddenly started wearing. You see, kid, revenge doesn't start with action. It starts with observation. And I was watching everything. We'll stop here. Because what I found next, that's when this stopped being about betrayal and started becoming about consequences. And trust me, consequences taste different when they're served cold. I moved into their guest room the night Emily came home from the hospital. It was a tidy room. Too tidy, like it had never really been lived in. Pale gray walls, decorative pillows no one used, a framed print that said, "Live, laugh, love." I remember thinking how hollow those words felt. Emily slept downstairs in the master bedroom. She couldn't climb stairs yet. Tubes still bruised her arms. Her skin looked thin, like paper stretched too tight. Ryan insisted he'd handle everything. He handled nothing. I woke up at 5 a.m. every day to help her sit up. I measured her medication. I kept track of the drainage from her incision. I learned how to lift her without hurting her. Ryan left early, came back late, always with an explanation ready. Investors are nervous. I can't lose momentum right now. We need stability after this scare. We. That word always made me quiet, because I didn't see much of we. 3 days into her recovery, I heard something that made my stomach turn. It was late, close to midnight. I couldn't sleep. Old bones don't like strange beds. So I went downstairs for water. The house was dark except for the faint glow from the kitchen island. Ryan stood there, phone pressed to his ear, voice low. I stopped in the hallway, out of sight. "She's fine," he was saying. It was dramatic, but she'll recover. Pause. A soft laugh. "No, she didn't know I was gone. Joe might suspect something, but he's old school. He won't say a word." Old school. He chuckled again. "Yeah, Freedom Weekend was worth it." Worth it? I felt my hands curl slowly into fists at my sides. Then he said something softer, something that changed the temperature in my blood. "I just need her stable long enough. Once the policy matures next quarter, things get easier." Policy. I didn't breathe. "I know," he continued. $2 million isn't life-changing in this market, but it's a clean start." Clean start. The ice inside my chest turned into something sharper. He ended the call, poured himself whiskey, and walked upstairs without noticing me. I stood there in the dark kitchen for a long time. $2 million. I didn't know about any $2 million policy, and I was her father. The next morning, I asked Emily gently. We were alone. Ryan had a meeting. "Baby," I said carefully while adjusting her pillow, "did you two ever take out additional insurance?" She blinked at me confused. "Yeah, last year. Ryan said it was smart planning, in case something ever happened." Her voice was weak, trusting. "He handled all of it." "Why?" I smiled lightly. Just making conversation. She didn't question it. That's what scared me. That afternoon, while she slept, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I went into my son-in-law's home office. I didn't snoop wildly. I was precise. Men like Ryan are organized when it comes to money. Ego and paperwork go hand in hand. It didn't take long. Top drawer. Locked. But Ryan underestimated something. I've worked construction most of my life. I've opened things that weren't meant to be opened. A small flathead screwdriver from the garage did the trick in under a minute. Inside the drawer were neatly stacked folders. Investments. Loan statements. And there it was. Life insurance policy. Emily Carter. I pulled it out carefully. $2 million. Primary beneficiary. Ryan Carter. Accidental and critical illness rider attached. Policy active for 11 months. Matures to full payout eligibility at 12. Next month. I sat down slowly in his office chair. My daughter almost bled out, and her husband had been celebrating. And talking about timing. I'm not a paranoid man, but I am observant. And the math didn't sit right. Now listen carefully, kid. I didn't jump to wild conclusions. I didn't accuse him. I didn't storm into the living room shouting about insurance money. Because here's the thing about men like Ryan. They rely on emotional reactions. They expect outrage. They prepare for confrontation. What they don't prepare for is patience. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. Locked the drawer again. Left no trace. That evening, I watched him differently. The way he looked at Emily when she winced in pain. Not concern, assessment. The way he hovered when nurses visited. Not love, monitoring. The way he checked his phone constantly, counting something invisible. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, comments, the phone call I overheard, the policy maturity date, the yacht pictures. I saved those to my own phone from Emily's account while she slept, quietly, carefully, because this had moved beyond betrayal. This was calculation. 5 nights later, something happened that confirmed my worst suspicion. Emily developed a sudden fever. Nothing dramatic at first, just slight. Ryan insisted it was normal post-op inflammation. I insisted we call the surgeon. He resisted. "Joe, you're overreacting. Let her rest." Overreacting. I called anyway. The surgeon demanded she come in immediately. Infection. Early stage, treatable, because we caught it in time. On the drive to the hospital, Ryan gripped the steering wheel too tightly. Not scared, agitated, as if something had gone off schedule. That's when I knew. Deep in my bones. This man wasn't just selfish. He was waiting for something to go wrong, and he was positioned to benefit if it did. That night in the hospital room, I stood by her bed again. Machines humming, soft beeping, her face pale but alive. I looked at her hand in mine, small, fragile. Mine since the day she was born. And I made a second decision. The first had been about revenge. The second was about protection. Ryan thought he was the only one planning ahead. He didn't know I'd spent 40 years building foundations that don't crack, and I was about to start laying one under his feet. One he wouldn't see. One he'd step on confidently. And when it gave way, he wouldn't understand how the ground disappeared. We'll stop here, because what I did next, it wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was paperwork. And sometimes, paperwork ruins a man more completely than fists ever could. The morning after the infection scare, I made 3 phone calls. Not to the police, not to a lawyer, not yet. First, I called an old friend of mine, Martin, retired forensic accountant. We used to play cards every Thursday before his wife passed. Quiet man. Notices patterns. I asked him a simple question. If someone wanted to position themselves for a payout, what would you look for? He didn't laugh. He asked for details. I gave him just enough. He went quiet for a long moment and said, "Start with debt. Greed leaves footprints in bank statements." So that's what I did. While Ryan was at meetings, I gathered what I could find. Loan letters, overdue notices tucked inside investment folders, credit card balances that didn't match the lifestyle he flaunted. He was drowning. High-interest loans, failed ventures, 2 maxed-out cards under a business name Emily didn't even know existed. The BMW lease 3 months behind. The yacht weekend, charged to a corporate card already flagged for review. $2 million wasn't comfort. It was escape. Second call was to Emily's surgeon. Not about her, about the policy. I asked casually how common it was for families to increase coverage before medical procedures. The doctor paused, then said carefully, "Unusually, timed policies sometimes raise questions." That word again. Timing. The third call was the most important. I contacted the insurance company directly. Not accusing, just asking about beneficiary updates. Turns out something interesting. The policy could be amended by the insured at any time, as long as they were mentally competent. Emily was, very much so. Ryan had handled the paperwork originally, but the final authority was hers. That evening, I sat beside her hospital bed while she ate soup slowly, hand trembling. "Baby," I said gently, "can we talk about something practical?" She nodded. I told her everything. Not dramatically, not angrily, just facts. The yacht, the phone call I overheard, the policy, the debt. At first, she defended him. Then she got very quiet, very still. Then she asked for her phone. She scrolled, found the yacht photos. Her face changed. Something inside her shifted. Not loud, just clarity. Tears slid down her cheeks silently. "He said he was in the lobby," she whispered. I didn't say anything, because sometimes the truth does its own work. The next morning, before Ryan arrived, we made an appointment. Insurance office, private, quiet. He had no idea. 2 hours later, the beneficiary was changed from Ryan Carter to the Emily Carter Recovery Trust, administered by a third party, untouchable without her direct oversight. Ryan wouldn't see a dime, not in life, not in death. When he showed up that afternoon, smiling like everything was under control, I looked at him differently, not with rage, not even with hatred, just with understanding. The foundation had shifted. He just didn't know it yet. And men like Ryan, they only realize the ground is gone when they're already falling. We'll stop here. Because what happened when he found out? That's when the performance ended, and the real panic began. And panic is very honest. Ryan found out 2 weeks later, not because we told him, because greedy men check their assets. Emily was home again by then, stronger, still pale but walking slowly with a brace. I'd stayed on under the excuse of helping with recovery. Truth was, I was waiting. That afternoon, Ryan was in his office with the door half closed. I heard the shift in his voice before I heard the words. "What do you mean I'm not listed?" Silence, then sharper. "There has to be a mistake." More silence. His tone dropped low and dangerous. When was this changed? I stood in the hallway, leaning casually against the wall, hands folded. His chair scraped hard against the floor. "Who authorized that?" he demanded. Pause. Then the sound of something hitting the desk. "Fine," he snapped. "Send me the documentation." He hung up. For a long moment, there was nothing but heavy breathing on the other side of that door. Then he opened it. He didn't see me at first. He walked straight toward the living room where Emily sat reading, legs propped carefully on pillows. His face wore concern, but his eyes, they were calculating. "Hey," he said softly, "did you change the insurance policy?" Emily didn't flinch. I was proud of her for that. "Yes," she said quietly. His jaw tightened just slightly. "Why?" She looked at him, really looked, in a way I hadn't seen before, like she was measuring him the way I had been. I wanted control over my own recovery. He tried to smile. "You don't trust me?" Silence. That silence was louder than any accusation. "I almost died," she said, "and you weren't there." There it was, the crack. Ryan inhaled slowly, composed himself. "I was working for us," he said gently. "You know that." Emily didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded faintly, and that calm unsettled him more than anger would have. That night, I noticed something else. He didn't touch her, not once. No goodnight kiss, no hand squeeze. He lay beside her, stiff as wood, staring at the ceiling. Because now, the math had changed. $2 million wasn't his safety net anymore, and without that, Emily wasn't an asset. She was responsibility. 3 days later, I got my final confirmation. I'd stepped outside to take a call from Martin, the accountant, when I heard Ryan's voice again through the cracked kitchen window. Low, furious. "She moved the policy," he said into his phone. "Yeah, all of it." Pause. "No, it's not accessible." Another pause. "Well, then we need another option." Another option. I felt something inside me settle into place. Not fear, not shock, just certainty. This wasn't about bad timing. This wasn't about selfishness. This was about motive. I walked back into the house quietly. He was still talking. I can't wait forever. Debt collectors are circling. There it was. Pressure. Desperation. The kind that makes men reckless. I stepped into the kitchen doorway. He turned. Saw me. His face changed instantly. Anger smoothing into casual indifference. He ended the call mid-sentence. "Everything okay, Joe?" he asked lightly. I nodded. Everything's becoming very clear. He held my gaze a second too long, then looked away first. That's when I knew the balance had shifted. Not fully, but enough. You see, kid, when a man realizes the easy road is gone, he shows you who he really is. Ryan wasn't grieving a near loss. He was grieving a missed payout. And now he was cornered. Cornered men make mistakes. And I was counting on that. We'll stop here. Because the next mistake he made, that's when I stopped playing defense and started closing the trap. And traps, if built carefully, don't snap loudly, they just lock. It happened on a Thursday. Emily had just started walking short distances without help. Slow steps, careful, still fragile, but stronger. Ryan had been strangely attentive that morning. Too attentive. Made her breakfast, offered to help her shower, hovered. I watched quietly. Around noon, he suggested she take a short walk in the backyard. "Fresh air," he said. "Doctor recommended movement." He wasn't wrong, but something in his tone felt rehearsed. The backyard had a small stone pathway Ryan had installed the year before, decorative, slippery when wet. And that morning, he'd accidentally watered the lawn early. I noticed the hose still coiled near the stones. I noticed the faint sheen of moisture. I noticed him watching her feet. Emily stepped carefully, holding the railing. One stone shifted, just slightly. Her ankle rolled. She gasped. And if I hadn't been 2 steps behind her, she would have fallen hard. Instead, I caught her, her body trembling in my arms. Ryan rushed forward. "Oh my God, are you okay?" His voice full of panic. But his eyes, they flicked to the ground, to that loose stone, then back to her. Too quick, too controlled. "I thought I secured those," he muttered. I didn't respond. I bent down, examined the stone. It hadn't loosened naturally. The base beneath it had been disturbed. Recently. The soil still darker underneath. Someone had lifted it, placed it back imperfectly. I stood slowly, met his eyes. Neither of us spoke, but something passed between us. He knew I knew. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I went outside with a flashlight, inspected every stone. Only one had been tampered with. Only the one directly in her path. Coincidence? Maybe. But I don't believe in maybe when patterns line up. Policy change. Mounting debt. Another option. And now, a staged fall. He wasn't bold enough to poison. Not bold enough for something obvious. But a fall? A surgical complication relapse? That could be tragic. And profitable. I stood there in the dark yard and realized something important. Ryan wasn't going to stop. He was escalating. Carefully, but escalating. And that meant I had to move faster. The next morning, I made another quiet call. Not to the police. Not yet. To a private investigator. Retired detective named Alvarez. Methodical, discreet, expensive. I gave him everything. Yacht photos, insurance policy timeline, debt records, the phone call fragments, the stone in the yard. He didn't react dramatically. Just said, if he's desperate, he'll push again. Desperate men hate losing leverage. Then he asked me one question. "Do you want proof or protection?" I answered without hesitation. "Both." That afternoon, we installed 2 small security cameras. One covering the backyard path, One covering the kitchen and medication cabinet. Ryan didn't notice. He never looked up. Men like him never do. They only look forward, toward money, toward exits, toward escape. 3 nights later, I caught him, on camera. At 1:12 a.m., he crept into the kitchen, opened Emily's medication organizer, switched 2 pills. I watched it live from my phone upstairs. My heart didn't race. It went still, very still, because now, it wasn't suspicion. It was intent. I walked downstairs before he could leave the room, turned on the light. He froze, pillbox still in his hand. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked afraid, real fear. "What are you doing?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. I was just checking the dosage. I stepped closer. "And swapping blood thinners for something stronger?" His face drained. He didn't know about the camera. He didn't know I had footage already saved to cloud storage. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No smooth answer came, because there wasn't one. Emily stirred upstairs, unaware, and in that bright kitchen light I saw him clearly. Not confident, not charming, not calculating, just cornered, and cornered men. They panic. "We'll stop here." Because what I did next, it wasn't shouting, it wasn't fists, it was something far more devastating. And when he realized the trap had fully closed, that's when he truly understood what freedom costs. He stood there with the pill organizer in his hand, fluorescent light humming above us, 2 capsules sitting wrong in the slot marked Thursday, evening. His fingers were still resting on them. I didn't raise my voice, didn't move fast. I just walked past him, opened the drawer beside the fridge, and pulled out my phone. Pressed play. The security footage filled the screen. 1:12 a.m. Him entering the kitchen, opening the pillbox, switching the medication. Clear, steady, undeniable. I held it up between us. For the first time since I'd known him. Ryan Carter stopped performing. His shoulders dropped slightly. His mouth parted. He wasn't calculating anymore. He was exposed. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "That's what they always say." "I understand perfectly," I replied. Upstairs, Emily shifted in her sleep. The house felt fragile, like one loud word would shatter it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It wasn't going to hurt her, just enough to set her back. A complication. Something manageable." Manageable. He said it like he was adjusting a stock portfolio. "You were going to make her bleed again," I said. He didn't deny it. He just looked tired. "Do you have any idea what I'm facing financially?" he whispered harshly. "You think I wanted this? I had no choice." No choice. I let that sit in the air between us. Then I said something very simple. "You had choices." Silence. He ran a hand through his hair. "If this gets out, I'm done," he said. "Career. Everything." That was the first honest thing he'd said. I nodded. "Yes." "Here's the thing, kid. I could have called the police right then, showed them the footage, had him arrested before sunrise. But prison wasn't enough. Prison would make him a victim in his own story. A man misunderstood. Pressured. Framed. No, I wanted something worse. I wanted him stripped of control, of image, of leverage, of everything he thought made him powerful. So I gave him a choice. "You're going to file for divorce," I said calmly. His head snapped up. "You're insane. You're going to file. You're going to claim irreconcilable differences. You're going to walk away clean. No contest, no demands, no claim on her assets, no argument." He stared at me. "And if I don't?" I tilted the phone slightly so the video kept playing in the corner of his vision. "Then, tomorrow morning, the police, your creditors, and every licensing board you answer to receive a copy of this." His jaw clenched. He tried to recover his composure. "You'd ruin your daughter's life with a scandal like that?" I looked him dead in the eye. You already tried to. That shut him up. He didn't sleep that night. I heard him pacing. He made 2 quiet phone calls around 3 a.m. Short ones. Desperate ones. By morning, he looked 10 years older. At breakfast, he told Emily he thought the stress of everything had revealed problems in their marriage. He said he didn't want to burden her during recovery. He said he would step away. She watched him carefully. Calm. Almost distant. Okay, she said softly. No fight, no pleading, just acceptance. He wasn't expecting that. Men like him expect resistance, drama, begging. But Emily had seen the yacht photos. She'd felt the absence. And now something inside her had hardened. By the end of the week, papers were filed. Ryan moved out quietly. No shouting, no neighbors watching, just boxes, a suitcase, and one last long look at the house as he loaded his car. He thought he'd lost money. He didn't yet realize he'd lost everything, because Alvarez, the investigator, had been working in the background. And what we'd uncovered? That would make the divorce the least of his problems. We'll stop here, because the final part isn't about anger, it's about consequences. And consequences have a way of spreading far beyond one kitchen. And far beyond one man. Once Ryan moved out, he thought the worst was behind him. Divorce papers filed, no criminal charges, no public accusation. He believed he'd negotiated his escape. That was his mistake. Alvarez had spent the past 2 weeks digging, and what he found was uglier than even I expected. Ryan hadn't just been drowning in debt. He'd been siphoning money, small amounts at first, transferring from joint accounts into shell LLCs he controlled, using Emily's salary to prop up failed investments, forging her electronic signature on 2 short-term loans. Nothing flashy, just quiet fraud, the kind that grows teeth over time. And then there was the yacht, not a friend's boat, rented under a business expense category tied to a client fund, which meant misappropriation, which meant embezzlement, which meant federal attention if reported properly. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to threaten again. I simply handed the file to a financial crimes attorney. Anonymous submission, documented evidence, time-stamped footage, signed affidavits from Alvarez. The system did the rest. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Ryan called me. First time since he left. His voice was stripped raw. "They froze my accounts," he said. I didn't answer. "Joe, did you do something?" I let the silence stretch. He exhaled sharply. "They're investigating everything. My firm suspended me. Clients are pulling out. I can't even access my own money." Own money? That word almost made me smile. "You made choices," I said calmly. He grew quiet. "They're saying criminal charges might be filed." Another pause. Then, softer. "I just needed time." Time. That's what he'd tried to steal from my daughter. Time she almost didn't have. "I gave you time," I replied, and then I hung up. The charges came quietly. Financial fraud, forgery, misuse of investor funds. The insurance incident never even had to surface publicly. His own greed buried him first. Emily watched it unfold from the safety of the couch, still healing, still fragile. She didn't celebrate. She didn't cry. She just looked free. One afternoon, she said something that stuck with me. "I think he was waiting for me to die." I didn't answer, because she already knew, and sometimes naming the truth doesn't make it stronger. It just makes it heavier. Ryan eventually took a plea deal. No dramatic courtroom speeches, no headlines, just probation, restitution, permanent loss of his professional licenses. His name scrubbed from the circles he'd worked so hard to impress. The yacht friends vanished. The blonde vanished. The investors vanished. When the money dried up, so did the admiration. Funny how that works. A year later, Emily sold the house, her choice, Used part of the recovery trust to start over somewhere quiet. She's stronger now. Laughs more. Talks louder. The silence that used to sit in her shoulders is gone. As for me, I sit on my porch some evenings and think about that first picture. Ryan on that yacht, champagne raised, sun blazing behind him. He thought that weekend was freedom. But freedom built on someone else's suffering never lasts. You know something, kid? Revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like patience. Documentation. Letting a man unravel himself. I didn't destroy Ryan. I just removed the safety net he built out of my daughter. And gravity did the rest. And here's the quiet truth. When someone shows you who they are in your child's darkest hour, believe them, then act accordingly. Now. That's the whole story. 6 months after the plea deal, I saw Ryan again. Not at a marina, not at a rooftop bar, at a grocery store, discount aisle, no suit, no watch, no shine. He looked smaller, not physically, internally. He saw me first, froze for half a second, then gave that old, practiced half smile, the one he used to wear at Sunday dinners. It didn't fit his face anymore. "Joe," he said quietly. No handshake this time. Just distance. "How are you?" he asked. Funny question. "I'm steady," I said. He nodded, looked down at the generic brand cereal in his cart. "You didn't have to destroy me," he muttered. There it was, still rewriting the story. "I didn't destroy you," I said calmly. "I stopped you." He swallowed. Didn't argue, because somewhere in there, he knew. He just couldn't say it out loud. He left the aisle first, didn't look back. Emily never asked me exactly how everything unfolded. She didn't need to. She knew enough. One evening, sitting on her new porch, she looked at me and said something soft. "Dad, thank you for staying. Not thank you for revenge. Not thank you for exposing him. Just for staying. And that's the part people misunderstand. This wasn't about punishing Ryan. It was about making sure my daughter had time. Time to heal. Time to see clearly. Time to choose herself. Men like Ryan count on distraction. On shame. On silence. They don't expect someone patient enough to wait in the dark and keep records. You know what the strangest part was? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished, like closing a door gently instead of slamming it. Because revenge, driven by rage, burns fast. But justice, built slowly, it lasts. Now let me tell you something important. If I had shouted in that kitchen, if I had hit him, if I had called the police immediately in anger, he would have become the victim of an overprotective father. Instead, he became the author of his own collapse. And that difference matters. A lot. So here's the quiet moral, kid. When someone betrays your child in their weakest moment, don't rush. Watch. Listen. Let them show you exactly who they are. And when you move, make sure it's final. Because the strongest storms, they don't scream when they start. They gather. And when they finally break, there's nothing left standing but truth. Now, that's truly the end. 2 years passed. Emily rebuilt her life slowly. New town, a smaller house. Less shine, more sunlight. She went back to nursing part-time first, then full-time. You could see the strength returning in her posture, not just physical, internal. She started laughing again, the real kind. Not the polite kind she used to use when Ryan was in the room. I visited every Sunday. We'd sit on her porch with coffee. No tension, no performance, just peace. That's how I knew we'd won. Not because Ryan lost everything, but because she gained herself back. As for Ryan, word travels in small circles. He moved twice. Took contract work under someone else's firm. Reputation follows a man quieter than gossip, but louder than apology. He tried to rebuild, but trust is a currency you don't get refunded. Once it's gone, You work twice as hard for half the return. That's gravity again. One evening, Emily asked me something unexpected. "Dad, if you could go back, would you do anything differently?" I thought about that long and hard. I thought about the kitchen light, the pillbox, the loose stone, the yacht, and I said the only honest thing I could. I would have trusted my instincts sooner. She nodded slowly. We sat in silence after that. The good kind. Here's what I learned, kid. Betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it brings wine to dinner. Sometimes it kisses your daughter on the forehead and checks a policy maturity date in the same breath. And revenge? Real revenge isn't destruction. It's removal. You remove the leverage. You remove the illusion. You remove the safety net. And then you step back, because a man standing on a lie will eventually fall through it. You don't have to push. Now, when I think about that day at the hospital, the bright blue sky, the yacht photo, the champagne raised in the air, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel clarity, because that was the moment I saw him fully, and once you see someone clearly, you can't be manipulated by who they pretend to be. That's the real protection. That's the real justice. And that's the real lesson. You don't fight every battle with fists. Sometimes you fight it with patience. And patience, when sharpened properly, is the cleanest blade of all. All right, that's the full story. Now pour yourself something warm. And remember, when someone shows you their character in your child's darkest hour, believe it and move quietly. That's how storms win.